There have been many portrayals of the Grim Reaper throughout media and literature, and all of them have been intriguing to say the least. However, what if there was a version of the Reaper that deviated from the norms of cold, cruel, and ominous, and replaced them with substance, emotion, and personality? What if Death himself was a character that we all could relate to? Well, this story checks all those boxes. It's more than battling against the Crones, the most evil and powerful witches in the land. It's more than some dark fantasy tale of good versus evil. Rather, a story about a boy thrown into the underworld, harnessing the very darkness that he was submerged into, and becoming the guardian of not only purgatory, but the human land as well. Chapter 1. The Crones Portal. When Death reached the portal of the underworld linking hell to the human land, he was taken aback by the magnitude of it. The portal was a jagged fissure, a pulsating rift torn through the air just above the ground, that looked like a raw, festering wound oozing thick black sludge and mist. It was more of a void than sheer emptiness that brought shame to the darkness of the night. There wasn't an audible hum, rather a guttural growl and the echoing of souls beating through. Though the Reaper never showed it in his expression, but a portal of this magnitude was a reason to be concerned, even for someone as powerful as Death. He quickly spun his scythe like a tennis racket, then gripped the handle tightly. He walked towards the portal and tapped the blade of the scythe against it. Despite the portal being made of dark energy, it made a hard crackling sound, like a mirror cracking before shattering. Then the Crones appeared within the portal, like they were shown through a crystal ball. Isadora, Josephine, and Philippa, the oldest witches in the land. Death recognized them by their cloaks, which matched the color of their eyes, black, blue, and red respectively. Their faces were rotting with maggots crawling out of their skin. Their teeth long, yellow, and monster-like, while their bodies looked fragile and decayed. The vision in the portal showed them to be in an unknown dungeon, with a cauldron in front of them bubbling and oozing the same black sludge. Ritual symbols were on the wall behind them and bodies were scattered across the floor. Bodies that one could only assume to be offerings. Death folded his arms and said, "Well, well, well. Aren't you three just the most beautiful woman that I have ever seen?" The Crones dashed forward like they were going to come through the portal, but the barrier stopped them. However, their faces were now closer and larger as they hissed at Death. "Don't hiss at me, you're not vampires. Last time I checked, you three were witches and weak ones at that. Imagine having to make deals at the crossroads just to obtain knowledge of the dark magic." Death was trying to antagonize them, hoping in a fit of rage they would make a mistake and give him an opening. But the Crones stayed calm and composed, and that's what made them so frightening. Then they giggled and retorted in unison.
"Mock us all you want, Reaper, but you are not capable of closing this portal. With all your powers, strength, and knowledge, you have been defeated."
The Crones were right for the most part. The Grim indeed did not know how to close the portal, but defeat would not come so easy to him.
Maybe you're right. Okay, how's this? Why don't you three tell me how to close the portal, and in return, with no extra cost, I will give you the most powerful bread mints you have ever tasted.
More mockery, but Death was trying to buy time. He needed to study the Crones, understand the symbols, smell the ingredients brewing inside the cauldron, anything he could find to help him close the portal. But then, just before he thought he found something, the Crones disappeared behind a mist of black sludge, and a new vision appeared in the portal, an image that froze Death to his core. The vision showed a lonely, petrified little girl sitting on a bench in the pouring rain on the darkest of nights. He recognized the child instantly, as the grip on his scythe loosened. Death walked towards the portal, reaching out to the little girl, but then recoiled his hand moments after. He felt weak. He felt alone, just the way he did eons ago. For that little girl was the reason the Grim Reaper had taken a stand against the Underworld. That little girl was the reason the Reaper had become Death. Chapter 2. The Underworld. Long ago, there was an imp that created chaos in the human land. Well, most folk referred to him as an imp, but his true nature, though visible to everyone, none had truly noticed. When 4 princesses were married into rich kingdoms, the imp seized his opportunity. It was custom for the new bride-to-be to complete tasks given to them by the king. These tasks and the difficulty that came along with them resulted from the rumors placed upon these women by their fathers. My daughter can spin yarn into gold, they would say. Some of them could create diamonds out of dust. Obviously, these were absurd claims, but could anyone blame them? Fathers wanted their daughters to marry into a rich family and be well taken care of for the rest of their lives away from poverty. And what better family to get married into than royalty? However, with the proposals being based on lies, these daughters had no idea they were being watched. No matter how difficult or impossible the task may have been, a small goblin-like creature would come to them when all hope seemed lost. However, there was a catch. There's always a catch. He would complete all their tasks without the king's knowing, in exchange for their firstborn child. Outraged, the woman refused, but when the imp sweetened the deal, it persuaded them to oblige. If they managed to find out and speak the imp's name into existence, then he wouldn't take anything from them. That makes it sound quite easy, right? After all, how difficult would it be to find out the name of a goblin-like creature that had been so gifted he could complete the most impossible tasks, making the impossible possible? However, 10 months later, when their time had come, none of those women had known the imp's name. In fact, some of them had even forgotten about the deal they made. And for those who did remember, no matter how much they've researched or how many people they spoke to, no one knew the name of the magical goblin. He was no sorcerer with tricks up his sleeve, for he was a demon, and his name was Rumpelstiltskin. But he was no magician. The signs were always there, making deals, fulfilling promises, vanishing whenever he wanted to, and most importantly was the name. If a demon's true name was known or spoken, it would ward off the entity for good. Nevertheless, Rumpelstiltskin had snatched 4 newborns away from 4 princesses and had taken them to the Underworld. He gifted these children with immense power and knowledge, not because he cared for them or wanted to protect them, rather used them to solidify his position in the Underworld. Those 4 human children would later be known as Death, Famine, Conquest, and War, the 4 riders of the apocalypse. Of course, those were never initially their names, rather for what they would be known for, their purpose and responsibility. But Rumpelstiltskin gave them human names to give them a false sense of fatherly affection. Death was Dagon, Conquest was Caecilius, Famine was Pharaoh, and War was Wilbeth. However, the Underworld was a place mighty and evil enough to corrupt even the strong-minded. Death noticed that from a very young age. He had the knowledge and wisdom to know that place was wrong, though he wasn't strong enough to stop it. The Grim Reaper was isolated from the rest of his siblings, but he cared for them deeply. They shared no biological relation to each other, but he always saw them as his own. And so, the Reaper would sit at a desk in Purgatory, a void of infinite land that looked pale in color, the veil between the living and dead. He taught himself to be a book collector, and Purgatory became his bookshop. When people died, he would visit Earth, comfort them in their final moments, and carry their souls to either heaven or hell. Though there were times where souls were too many to carry, sort, shelve, or deliver at once, thus scraping away pieces of his own soul. Having to live through an entire lifetime's worth of memories with folk just before they passed on really took its toll. Dagon, a once handsome young man, had now become a gaunt figure. His skin and flesh could no longer bear the pain and sorrow that people carried in their final moments. But still, he stayed true to his work. Dagon made sure to deliver souls to either heaven or hell based on the lives they've lived. When purgatory became daunting, he would visit his siblings. Pharaoh would be in her dungeon that looked more like a chemistry lab. Caecilius would pace around his dungeon, reciting words that sounded so convincing and trusting that even if he spoke nonsense, he could urge everyone to follow suit. And then there was Wilbeth, the 15-foot Titan warrior who would spend days and nights swinging that warhammer that no one else could carry except the Reaper. But his siblings had kept him in the dark. What he believed them to be was actually the opposite. The Grim Reaper had been under the assumption that, much like his own nickname, he would not be responsible for death itself, rather a messenger. And so he believed the same was true for his siblings. But he was sadly mistaken. For conquest did not provide kings and village folk with counsel. Instead, he poisoned their minds with carefully spoken word that was powerful and strong enough to manipulate them. Famine did not cure diseases or plagues in the human land, she caused them. And war did not stop bloodshed, conflict, and misery. He orchestrated it. The Grim Reaper would have remained in the dark till the end of time, if not for a little girl in the human land on the brink of death. The Reaper felt a weird hum in his hollow chest, strong enough to make his entire body vibrate. And so, on that dark night, the Reaper would travel to the human land to carry this innocent little girl's soul to heaven, not realizing that he would coincidentally meet his beloved mother, Seraphine. Chapter 3. The Groom's Memory. The Reaper arrived at the human land, reaching his destination at a rural village. The place looked struggling, either from a recent plague or the cries of battle. However, the Groom moved towards a bench to where the vibrational hum in his chest was the loudest. There was a little girl sitting on the wooden bench. She had her school uniform on, neat and tidy, but her face looked pale. She had a devastating cough with phlegm and droplets of blood whenever she did. Her time was nearing and she would soon depart from this world. The Reaper had been through this many times, but it never got easier. If anything, whenever children were involved, he would feel his own soul ripping itself apart from the inside. This was the hardest thing that he would have to carry. He wore his long black hooded cloak with his face hidden in darkness. He never wanted them to see his ugly nature and frighten them before departure. Souls would find it more difficult to transition into the afterlife if he did. He gathered his thoughts, composed himself, cleared his throat, and said, "Greetings, little one. Mind if I sit with you?" "Why, certainly," the little girl said, introducing herself as Isabel. She told the Groom that she's been waiting for her father to finish work. He normally came back by bus and she would sit on the bench, have her lunch and wait hours on end for his return. Her father didn't have much, she told him. But since Mama died, he's been working extra hard to put her through school. The Grim Reaper indeed hated this part. No matter how strong he was, he struggled to endure moments like these. Then Isabel began coughing, losing her breath each time. The Reaper offered her a napkin, but she kindly refused, showing him her own box of tissues. "I don't feel so well, mister," she said as the Reaper looked away for a moment, wiping his tears. "Do you think Papa will return soon? I don't think that I could keep my eyes opened any longer." Maybe you can wake me up when he arrives. He's a short man with brown hair carrying a briefcase. Will you be able to do that for me, mister? The Reaper had been crying, though the shadow cast by his hood never showed it.
Sure, kid. I'll be sure to wake you up.
But he knew that it was a lie, for the little girl gently rested her head on the Reaper's shoulder, taking her final breath. While her body remained on the bench adjusted comfortably by the groom, her soul in a white orb-like energy ball had left her body. The Reaper gently grabbed it, holding the soul like it was the most valuable thing in the universe. He struggled. Souls of the youth were always heavy, a burden that never lessened with time. As he walked away from the bench, carefully delivering the soul to heaven, he noticed an elderly woman frantically entering the village. She wore old rags for clothes and her hair long, dirty and white. "Have you seen my son?" she frantically called out to the village. "My boy, my child, have you seen him?" Then the Reaper heard the village whispers that followed, murmurs and gossip. "Oh, it's this woman again," they say. "How long will she keep this up for? Can you believe she left the prince and her life of riches searching for her boy? It's tragic," they say, but now it had reached the point of insanity. Many have now believed that she never had a child at all. Then the elderly woman cried out louder, grabbing villagers nearby asking the same question. But her next words, those were the ones that froze the Reaper to his core. The woman's words were difficult to understand from all the tears, but she said, "He took my child. He broke his deal and he took my child. I knew the imp's name. I heard his name when he walked around the fire, dancing in the woods. Rumpelstiltskin. Rumpelstiltskin," she cried out. "Give me back my boy." And now, Dad's memory had been shaken from the thundercrack. He opened and closed his tiny white eyes within his hollow eye sockets. The Crones portal was still in front of him, but now the night seemed darker than before. The image of the little girl inside the portal had disappeared just as the Reaper woke up from his daydream. Though, he heard a faint voice behind him. He felt immense power and pressure. A voice of a male calling out to him, whispering the word "brother." "I can help you close this portal, brother." When the Reaper had fully gained consciousness of his senses, he looked around and saw who was standing behind him. "I don't need your help," the Grim Reaper said sternly. Then the voice replied, "Please, brother, don't push me away." But that said, "I refuse to accept help from you, Cupid." Chapter 4. Cupid. Cupid, formerly known as Eros, stood in the dark woods with his long bow. He wore a crimson hooded robe-like cloak, and his eyes glowed magenta. He wasn't as large as the other angels height-wise, but he was broad and buff. Cupid dealt with cosmic attraction. He was responsible for any force that combined matter and reproduced life. In his quiver were 2 sets of arrows, one set gold-tipped and the other set of lead. The gold arrows were used to create an attraction of love, affection and desire, while the lead arrows, well, that set was the reason the other angels were careful not to make him angry. The lead arrows were used as rejection and revulsion. When struck, the arrows could cause horrific and frightening levels of obsession, humiliation and tragedy. They could bring down even the Velzauri if he wanted to. However, his relationship with death has been strained. So Cupid said, "Why do I repel you so much, brother? You have that much hate in your soul for me. Can I not just try and help?"
"Don't annoy me, Cupid. Take your fancy little arrows and shoot them into the sky, like you always do." However, Cupid's arrows were anything but little. The arrowheads were the width of an average person's head. "Have I done something to offend you, brother?" Cupid asked while his voice was filled with sincerity.
If I could just try and help.
What? Help me like you've helped Psyche? Are you going to abandon me as well, Cupid? The way you abandon everyone that gets close to you.
Cupid's eyes glowed brighter, and before the wind could even blow, he drew a lead arrow and fired it. It soared past the side of the Reaper's face not by much and toppled over 19 of the tallest trees in the woods. However, Death never flinched. His eyes were now flames and he closed the distance, holding his sight with one hand while the blade pressed against Cupid's throat.
Calm down, Eros, Death said. I am not one of your fellow angels.
You do not want me as your enemy.
Then what have I done to upset you so? You do not know the full story of Psyche.
Death recoiled his sight, turned his back to Cupid, and examined the portal once more. When he glanced over his shoulder, he saw Cupid didn't move an inch, waiting for an answer.
Then the Reaper said, "It was I who carried her soul to purgatory. Not you, me. I couldn't take her to heaven because your kind would have punished her. And hell, I guess I don't need to explain that. I hear her soul floating around purgatory, weeping and wailing your name. I hear her sorrow like a broken fucking tape recorder on loop. How could you do that to her, Eros? Of all the angels, how could you do that to her? She loved you.
And do you think I didn't love her? Psyche knew the conditions. She knew the boundary. She could never look upon my face, but her sisters convinced her otherwise." Cupid then removed the hood from his cloak as his long blonde hair fell to the sides. "This is the burn from the candle wax. It has since not left. She broke the one rule we angels have with mortals. They can never look upon our faces, you know that. That night, lying next to her in bed, her love for me lessened, and she betrayed my trust. The candlelight revealed my face and the law was broken. When my mother Aphrodite found out, she had no choice but to put Psyche through the divine trials for immortality. Those were the rules, Dagon. You think not that I have tried fighting for her. They cut off my wings for my disobedience."
"Well, boo fucking who," the Reaper replied. "You preach to me about rules. Eros, you fool, you were the one that broke the rules first, when you came down to the human land and fell in love with a mortal woman. Of course you wanted to see what her love looked like, you blithering idiot."
"But Dagon,
I am not finished speaking. Psyche loved you for months without seeing your face. She loved you not because of how you looked, because of how she felt around you. Just because you came to the mortal land, letting humans turn you into an immature prick doesn't excuse you. And now the old Eros is back with his quiver of arrows, and I'm supposed to forget Psyche's tortured soul in purgatory."
Cupid did not respond for a while. Who would? Then he drew another arrow gold in color and fired it at the Crones' portal. Shockingly, the portal reacted to it compared to the Reaper's side. Cupid spoke, but his voice sounded annoyed and hurt, with a pinch of defeat echoing through. "I will not beg. I have come to offer my help whether you want it or not. You can hate me for it, but if you want to protect this land, you need to listen to me. These Crones know dark magic of ancient times, maybe more ancient than I am. Though I know of a group who had taught humans such knowledge, and I know where they are held captive."
"Who are you talking about?" the Reaper replied. "Certainly not them. By now they would be dead."
Cupid answered, "The Grigori, the first angels who came to earth, the Watchers as documented in our books. They obtain knowledge of everything known to mankind, heaven and hell. They would know on how to close the portal. What say you, Reaper?" Death looked at the portal, then back at Cupid and sighed.
"Fine. Take me to the Grigori."
Chapter 5. The Grigori. Grigori, meaning those who are awake or watching, were angels sent to earth to observe humanity. They were assigned to enforce divine law and become teachers only in limited, permitted ways. Think of them more as surveillance and guardianship, but never interference. Their fall was not linked to outcasts from heaven. Their rebellion was not born of hatred, but failure of restraint. 200 Grigori were sent to the human land, confident that their teachings would benefit mankind and lead them on the right path. They never expected, much like Cupid, to fall for mortal woman. The Watchers knew that it was wrong, but love oftentimes makes people and angels alike do strange things. So the Grigori swore an oath on the mountaintop that if one of them had been caught, they all would suffer the consequences of punishment. Hence, with the lack of restraint, the Grigori taught humans the forbidden arts: weapon forging, swords, armor, and warfare, sorcery, enchantments, astrology, celestial cycles, herbalism, alchemy, poisons, cosmetics, wisdom, and lies. They advanced humanity faster than they were meant to evolve, not realizing that in the process they corrupted mankind and destroyed balance. But the horror never stopped there. While relationships between angels and mortals was a recipe for disaster, the Grigori had committed an even greater sin. They created offspring. These offsprings were called the Nephilim, monstrous, giant, human-like beings that became violent at times. The Nephilim drained the earth of its resources, and once that had been depleted, they turned their attention to animals, devouring them whole. And when the animals were no more, then they began devouring humans. The Nephilim became unstoppable cannibalistic creatures that haunted the land for too long. As punishment for the ruin of mankind, the most powerful angels were sent to the land to exterminate them. The angels then took the Grigori held captive beneath the earth, or the abyss as rumor has it, restraining them with chains, forced to witness their offspring die while they await their judgment. However, while the Nephilim were dead, their spirits were never destroyed, thus fueling the origin of demons. A Nephilim has already been mentioned in the series since the very beginning. For those of you who thought Zaza, the hired demon, was just a monster, well, now you have your answer. Demons, or the Nephilim, have since decided to destroy the human land and any angels that may protect it. Nevertheless, the Grigori, despite being held captive, are dangerous and useful in their own right. They hold ancient knowledge that can either fix the world and humanity, or they can break it even more. So as the Grim Reaper and Cupid traveled to find and seek answers from the Grigori, Death had no doubt they would be able to help him. However, what Death didn't know were the true intentions of Cupid. It begged the question, if his wings were cut off, then how did he reach the human land? Was Cupid cast out of heaven, or was he sent to distract the Reaper? To be continued. Okay guys, so that's 5 videos in a row regarding the Curse of the Werewolf series and the Werewolf and Reaper. I may or may not be uploading this upcoming Sunday. For those of you who may have noticed in the video, this book is almost finished, which means that I have to make a few more quite soon. But I will keep you updated through the community posts. So for those of you who have made it to the very end, I would like to thank you all for listening, and until the next one, do take care.